Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the reaction of the Indian media and much of their political class on Indians being deported, repatriated back to India from the United States. Now, these are Indian citizens, and that's not in dispute. Nor is it in dispute that they are illegally in the United States, nor is it in dispute that they've been given deported orders where they've been told to leave the country and have refused to accept those orders, nor is it in dispute that they've had court hearings which they refused to turn up for. So that they're illegal is not in question, that they're Indian citizens is not in question, nor is it in question that they've broken multiple laws over a sustained period of time while staying in the unit. None of that's in dispute. But the Indian media and political class are outraged, catatonic, absolutely beside themselves that Indians, it is a national insult. We are being insulted. It is a personalized loving device to India, and so on. So all this and they've been going hyperbolic about it. So what's the issue here? Well, the issue is entitlement. The complete attitude of India and Indians and Indian government and Indian policy and Indian aspirations and so on is that India has a massive surplus population into the hundreds of millions, and they want to export that population to the rest of the world. So India's primary primary above all else is people. We want to export our people to the rest of the world. And they have this very deeply ingrained sense of entitlement about this. And this has been largely sort of supported and fostered and underwritten, if you like, by the globalist cabal, the globalist machine. They don't mind this at all, and they openly encourage it and facilitate it and assist Indians wherever they can. Now, whenever there's a trade agreement between India and any other country, but particularly the English-speaking first world countries, India insists that part of the deal must be, and the biggest part of the deal must be, that you take shitloads of Indian migrants into your first world rich white country. That's it. Non-negotiable. You got to do it. And unfortunately, white countries the world over have been caving, going down like sacks of shit to these Indian demands. Why? God only knows, but they have been. And so India has this thing of exporting a lot of Indians. Now, it wouldn't be so bad, I guess, if we were talking about the very best and the brightest. The Indians claim they're exporting their bright people, but that's bullshit. If it was the very best, say the top 20 or 30 AI, artificial intelligence software engineers in India. India's supposed to be pretty good at this. I doubt it somehow, but let's suppose they are. Then how many of these top of the top type people are around in India? What would it be? 100 people. Let's include rocket science in here. Let's include everything. Let's throw the lot in there and say how many world-class, A-list people are there in India that could be used in the West, that the West doesn't have, or could do with more of, or something like that. Would there be 100 people in the whole of India? 200. Let's be generous and say it's 1,000. That would be it. That would be the extent of India's people exports. But instead, they're exporting people who are, deputy assistant, junior suburban accountants, and those are the sort of people that they're exporting. Lazy parasites, freeloaders, passengers, and these people can only get jobs in affirmative action gigs in government and big multinational firms that are part of the globalist people movement cartel gig anyway. So India's got nothing to offer the rest of it. Nothing. I mean, maybe going to other third world countries, that might be a help. But let's put some perspective on India here. They are one of the poorest countries in the world per capita. So their per capita is one of the poorest countries in the world. It's like 1/20th of the income of a white Western country. So This is not a rich country. It's not a successful country. You'd say it's a failed basket case country in many ways. Now, there's a rich elite that parasite and sponge off the rest of the classes there. They're called the Brahmins, and they fancy themselves as cultural and spiritual demigods. They fancy themselves as almost leaders of the whole world, in the demigod sort of stakes. And there's, 60 odd million out of 1.5 billion, depending on whose numbers you look at, by the way. There's a give or take 60 million Brahmins in India, and they consider themselves beyond entitled. They are entitled upon entitled. Now, there's the next class down from the Brahmins, in a very caste, C-A-S-T-E, a very caste sort of class type system of social hierarchy. The next class down, they are who fancy themselves, by the way, as Brahmins in waiting, and there's a lot of people in that class that you'd say are horrible social climbers, and they're fixated with going to the West and then getting one of their number, one person from their village or wider family, the wider family being second and third and fourth cousins and everything, getting one member of their family into the West, then bringing out the whole family, wives, brides, and they always send back to the village of their ancestors for brides and husbands. Now, if we look at the current migration rate to the white-speaking countries, so we've got Britain, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. Within the next 50 years, Indians will be the majority in all of these formerly 99% white English-speaking countries. That's how many people are being moved out of India into these white countries. So, and by the way, the nationalist Indian media celebrates it. They think it's a wonderful thing. We'll be the majority in Australia very soon, and we will decide how things are run and what goes on and who gets what. You wouldn't want to be in a situation where upper class Indians who think they're entitled to steal from you and take from you for their own aggrandizement and enrichment, that they're going to be in charge in these white countries, and the white people will be a poor underclass that'll be ordered around in the same way the blind people were in that John Wyndham novel, The Day of the Triffids. So this is the future we have to look forward to if current trends continue. Now, I've argued for a while now, and I'll mention again here, I think one of the biggest dangers to the Western world, apart from just the overall mass movement of third world peasants into the West, the biggest danger is mass movement of Indians out of India into the West, because the Indian government is fixated upon and is demanding that you must take shitloads of our surplus population, otherwise we won't do business with you. And I think the white Western countries of the world need to, whether they coordinate, band together, no, that's not going to happen. You keep your part, and if these people are so wonderful that we are sending you all these brilliant people, no, you're not. You're sending us a bunch of freeloaders and parasites. So you can keep those people. If they're so good, then they can make your country great and fantastic. But again, the conversations in the background that the media don't talk about as much as the Indian politicians say, hey, we get 3,000 applicants for every job we've got in India. We've got to get rid of our people, otherwise the volcano will explode, because we'll have all these people here that want jobs, and they want a future, and they want to rearrange the country so it and the politics and the economy, so they've got opportunities. Well, you should keep them there, and then change your economy and your country and your structure and your social structures. Don't export the people that you think are going to be a problem and create pressure for the various changes you need to make in your country. Because that's what they're doing. They're just exporting those people. Now, when the Indians first started, and I've mentioned this before, Indians first started arriving in Australia, they couldn't get jobs there. Their qualifications weren't recognised. You remember, it's a horrendously corrupt country. You can't have a shit there without bribing somebody. So their qualifications, assuming they even existed, weren't worth anything. Not so much the Brahmins, because they're so cultured and sophisticated their Socratic way, if you can call it that they come across as educated, even though the reality is they believe work is beneath them, beneath their dignity. It's the plebs and the peasants do the work. It's us who live and swan around like we're high-powered, kick-ass dudes. So they've got a real problem with doing work and being responsible and accountable, which means they're useless as employees in any organisation that focuses on merit and results. But because Indians had such trouble getting jobs and more of them were coming, the government, I would suggest that the egging on of the Indian government, the government in Australia and around the Western world, effectively wholesale changed employment laws to create carve-outs for Indians. So, there are entire public service departments in Australia that went from 100% white and then next day they were 100% Indian. And now you go into a lot of government departments and all you hear is English spoken with an Indian accent, and they want respect, by the way. You will respect me, you damn white fascist Nazi. So it's changed the whole complexion of employment in the big multinationals that are, co-opted into the globalist mass people movement, and of course the governments and the public service. They're creating public service departments in the West just so they can give Indians lots of jobs. The same has happened in the schooling system. Certainly when I was at school, what I remember from school was Indians were always in the bottom class. They were always in the bottom class, and this was in the days of strictly pass or fail exams, by the way. So, but when affirmative action education came in and diversity and equity and all those things, suddenly Indians were catapulted into the top classes. I mean, it used to be that only white people were in the top classes when pass and fail exams existed, primarily white boys. And then when affirmative action education came in, suddenly there's hardly any white kids in the top classes. That can't be a coincidence, can it? So Indians are being pushed into the West, the white West again, England, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and will very soon be a majority. And they're demanding special carve-outs, special places in council, special places in regional governments, special places in national governments, and they want dispensation and handouts and allowances and all these sorts of things, which will and do erode the very fabric of what democracy is: equality before the law and one vote, one value, all this sort of stuff. It's corrupting all of that. So again, just the biggest danger is to the West, I believe, is Indian mass migration and the very insistent, shrill demands by the Indian government that you must take our surplus population. No debates, no discussion. You must do it. And I think there needs to be strong pushback, not just from the United States, but from the rest of the white West, because again, over the next 50 years, Indians will be in the majority in all of those white, hitherto white countries, and that I think must be aggressively opposed and pushed back upon. Coming now just back specifically to the issue of American Indians in America. Now, the number of Indians that supposedly are illegal in the United States, most of them, by the way, aren't people who arrived illegally through the southern US border. I mean, some are, but primarily it's visa overstays. Now, these visa overstays can be tourist visas or work visas or student visas or combinations of the above and this sort of thing. So but it's visa overstays are primarily the thing, and the Indians don't want to go back to wherever it is, and they're working in corner stores that are owned by Indian mafia gangs and this sort of thing. The Indian mafia diaspora. This needs to be cleaned up urgently. This whole area of fake businesses and labour hire scams and so on. All these people, they're supposed to find work within 30 days, and there's all these again Indian mafia groups that sign them up and say they're employees of some labour hire company. They're not employees. It's bullshit. And their family in India assuming they come from a family with a bit of money, then pays bribes to the Indian labour hire firm that's falsely claiming they've employed these people, and so on. So all that desperately needs to be cleared up, because millions upon millions of Indians are in the United States under these fake labour hire scams after their legitimate visa, which may be, say, a student visa, for example, has expired. So this needs to be addressed and cleaned up. And this idea that the Indians can say it's outrageous that their law-breaking citizens are being repatriated back to India, and it's somehow terrible or evil or unspeakable, or it's shameful, or it's a humiliation. Excuse me. What about the illegally staying in the United States? Why isn't that a shameful set of beer? But no, they're allowed to do that. We're allowed to break. It's when you make us accountable for. And this sums up the Indian attitude. We can break the law and do what we want. That's okay. But when you hold us accountable for the law breaking, then that's an outrage. And I had that same attitude from Indians that I've employed over the years, that they're entitled to everything but ashamed of nothing. So when they're you say you've got a PhD in computer coding, and you've been here for a month, you haven't cut a single line of code. Do you mind? I want to see some work here. And they bluster and huff and puff about what an outrage it was that, how dare you talk to me that way? And I'm an important person. I'm a Brahmin, don't you know? No, you're employed to do a fucking job. You've got to do it. Now, I want you to cut a line of code and run it in front of me right now. Otherwise, I'm going to have to fire you. Do you understand that? And of course, they can't cut a line of code. Then the guy comes clean with you and says, well, look, actually, my family just bribed the university to give me a PhD. I don't know the first thing about computers. I can barely switch them on. But, my social status in India is that I've got to have a PhD. It's part of the social status gig. And so that's it. Now, in Australia, it seems to be a bit different. You actually expect someone who's got a PhD to actually have earned it. Well, that's not how it works in India. I'm not supposed to do any work. I'm a socially superior person. I don't have to do work. I shouldn't have to do work. It's demeaning to do work. And to have a lower class guy like you, me, this is, you're not a Brahmin, have a lower class guy like you tell me what to do. That's another humiliation. It's unacceptable. So unacceptable or not, you're employed to do, you're paid to do a job. Well, no, I'm being paid because I'm just here because of my social status. No, that's not how it works in Australia. And, you can see why they're a dirt poor basket case fucking country with those attitudes. So you got to fire the guy, and he still walks out the door, shouting insults at you because you held him accountable for doing work that he claimed he was capable of doing. So anyway, that's the thing. So I this idea that the Indians are outraged over being repatriated, I hope Trump ups the ante. I hope the Trump administration follows through, that all these fake labour hire firms and all this other stuff and all these workarounds the Indians use. And if you want to stop Indian migration, it's not hard. Tax their remittances back to me. Just of Indians working in the West, they send back to their families in India something in the order of $200 billion annually. That's money that's not spent in the West on consumer goods and whatever else. Now, okay, they may have to live 10 to a room or something like that, but $200 billion annually is sent back to India, or those are the numbers that I've seen at least, from Indians working in the West. But there's a few things. Firstly, your tax remittances going back to India, you do that. And second thing is, you don't allow them to send back to the village of their ancestors for husbands or brides. You do those two things, and Indians will not want to come to the West anymore. That's all you have to do, and they will self-deport and will decide, no, I don't want to go to the West. If I can't import a bride from the village of my ancestors. This even goes for Indians that are born in the West. Indians that I've met who are born in the West, they still send back to the village of their ancestors for husbands and brides, to keep the cultural vibe sort of fresh and new and current and up to date, and all this sort of thing. It's insane. Why would we let people like that into the West? What do they bring to the table that's of any use culturally or socially? You've been a Tacitus today. Your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.